Hi everyone, Kate here. Larkin and I fully intended to record another full episode for the month of June. We were hoping to make it also Pride themed, but unfortunately, my amazing mother passed away very unexpectedly recently. And so we weren't able to record another episode because I am, allowing myself some time and being with my family. So I know you all will understand that and I appreciate you, but I did not want to leave you all without any content. So we are going to upcycle the first bonus episode that we recorded for our paid patrons, which is about the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire. Hopefully you all find it interesting. It is certainly tragic and horrific, as we love to be here at Now It's Ruined. And it's also a very fascinating story that provides some history behind some of the current labor laws in the United States. Thank you so much for your support and understanding during this time. We really appreciate every single one of you. Please stick around and we will have another ruinous episode for you coming up very soon.
You're having a good time on the couch with your friends. You're having a good time in the bed alone. You're having a good time watching let us ruin your day. Yay!
Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the first ever bonus episode of Now It's Ruined, which we will be releasing for paid patrons with our very first full episode, which means there's a real possibility that no one will ever see it or hear it. But we're coming out swinging. We're like, you know what? We didn't want to just make a Patreon and not have a plan and not have anything on there right off the bat. So since Larkin was responsible for our main episode this time about false eyelashes, I volunteered to research this one. It's not really ruining anything. It's just a straight up tragedy. So the day before this episode is released, March 25th, is the 114th anniversary of the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire. And I was vaguely familiar with this, but basically what I knew about it was a big fire and a lot of women died.
That's all honestly, when you mentioned it, I was like, that's weird. I have this very clear notion of what happened. I don't know the why of it or who was really involved, but as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, a bunch of specifically women died in a fire. That's all I remember.
So for anyone else who all you know about it is a bunch of women died, that is true. But we're going to get a little more into the why and how. So my favorite description of this event called it a fatal conflagration, which is so good.
Love that.
I wish I had come up with it, but I didn't. It was Britannica. But if you're going to be bested by somebody, Britannica, I guess, is a good one.
They have some like catty and really witty writers. That's the last episode. All the cool quotes I pulled were from Britannica being shady towards its subject. Whoever writes
That's amazing
for them. Yeah, I like the vibe.
That's great. Like Britannica was like Pliny the Elder, well, whatever.
Yeah.
I love that. Britannica vibes. Britannica, if you would like to sponsor Now It's Ruined, please reach out. I don't know, maybe someone from Britannica is paying us as a paid patron and we'll hear this. There's no way. So, as we kind of said, I think most of us learned about this at some point, at least in passing in history class, because it had a big impact on labor laws in the United States. But if you're not from the US, or if, like me, it went way over your head because you didn't give a shit about US labor laws in high school or whatever you learned about it, we're going to explore it. Now that we're all nerdy adults who love learning, which I assume is why you're here. So let's dive in. So the main reason that this event is taught to us in history class is because the 146 deaths that resulted from this factory fire were preventable. The workers, most of whom, as we said, were women, actually most of whom were teenage girls who did not speak English and were working 12-hour plus days, died because of a host of horrendous working conditions that came to a head on March 25th, 1911. Primarily young women, young immigrant women who were not even women, no, teenage girls.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Female children.
Female children. Yeah, I didn't recall that either, that they were so young.
Yeah, it's pretty upsetting. And then they were just trying to work to obviously like make a living. You know, it was kind of a perception that American girls went out and got jobs, so they wanted to be more like American girls, these immigrant girls, and they went out and got jobs, and this is what happened to them. So the Triangle Shirtwaist Company was owned by Max Blank. I don't know if it's Blank or Blanc. Blank feels more disrespectful, so that's what I'm going to use because he seems like he was kind of a dick.
And I also like it because it sounds like just Max, who cares, fill in the blank.
So it was owned by Max Blank and Isaac Harris. They both happened to be Russian immigrants who immigrated to New York. And Harris was a tailor. He worked in immigrant sweatshops initially, which is where I assume he learned how to run one. Spoiler alert. You would think it would make him be like, no one should have to be in these conditions.
Right,
but instead
exactly.
he was like, if you're at the top of this chain, it's a pretty sweet deal.
Right? It's like the opposite of all the feel-good stories. Yeah, I saw what it was like. I'm going to change it for the better. No, I'm going to do this because it actually is profitable if you're not one of the sad suckers working in the shop.
Maybe he was even like, it wasn't that bad as a sweatshop worker. So,
Mark,
suck it up and do it. It's part of like working your way.
Or wait, it wasn't Mark. It was Isaac.
It's Isaac. And it's Max is the other one. I'm going to call him Blank and Harris.
Blank and Harris. Okay.
Anyway. So Harris, yes, he was the one who had more of the like practical skill. He was a tailor. He had the sweatshop experience. Blank was more entrepreneurial, which honestly you can tell just from pictures. So before I even knew which one was which and what their personalities were like at all, which there isn't a ton about them, but I was like, oh, that guy's the salesman. Like you can just tell from the photo. He's very like kind of gregarious looking. I'll put links to photos. Cornell actually has a robust library of photos about this and information about this. So I will link to their information, and you can see a photo of Blank and Harris. And actually, I kind of want to send it to you so you can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I just sent Larkin the photo of Blank and Harris so she can see if she agrees with me.
Oh, definitely the one on the left.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's standing. He's just kind of looks like cocky and like ready to charm people. He's like, let's go. And Harris looks a little awkward, which makes sense given their roles. So Blank has this major salesman energy. He became a garment contractor and he was collecting material from big manufacturers and then turning it into clothing for less money. So he's like more of the business mind. So Blank and Harris both married cousins of each. Well, everyone's a cousin. I guess not everyone, but you mean to a pair of cousins. They were cousins to each other. I'm making this so much more confusing than it needs to be.
Wait. But I love it. Wait, so who?
So there are two cousins.
Yes, that were
female
related.
Cousins.
They were related. Okay, so they married a pair of cousins.
Right, and so each of these cousins married Blank. One married Blank and one married Harris. So they're connected by marriage to this family.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and that's how they meet. So they start chatting and they're like, Harris has this industry experience, Blank has the business experience. Neither of them care too much about workers' rights, so they're perfect business partners.
It's a match made in heaven. Let's go.
Let's go. So in 1900, they start the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. So before anybody asks, because I know you're wondering, a shirtwaist is a style of women's shirt that had just gotten really popular at the turn of the century, and it basically looked like a man's shirt, but with more kind of embellishment, and it was nipped in at the waist so you could tuck it into your skirt. So they were like button-ups with very poofy, flowy sleeves. Think of like Anne of Green Gables kind of deal.
Yeah, I have the image for sure.
Yeah, or like Peter Pan, Mrs. Darling, that kind of era. Mm-hmm. And they were looser than bodices, and so women were like, fuck yes, I can breathe. Like,
thank God.
Yes, please.
I can't wear pants, but I'm gonna wear these.
Right. So Blank and Harris make a whole bunch of money making shirtwaists, which they use to move into this new space on the fateful 9th floor of the Asch building in Manhattan. Eventually, they also expand to the 8th and the 10th floors. So they have the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of the Asch building. From my understanding, the 10th floor, I think, is the top floor, but I don't know that for sure. The 9th floor, however, is where most of the tragedy in this story occurs. There is still a building at this location, by the way, in Greenwich Village. I think it's right by Washington Square Park. So if you go, there's a little plaque. You can go and, if you're in New York, point at it and say, that's where a bunch of women died. Girls died.
It's wild to me, though, like, and you'll probably talk about it, but that there would be a factory, essentially, that high up. I don't know if that makes me
Mm.
sound ignorant or just, I mean, obviously there was little space to be had for those kinds of things, but like the fact that it feels like, manufacturing things and some sort of warehouse should be on the ground. In my brain, I don't know if that is
Seems easier
ridiculous.
to get product in and out, etc. Yeah. But I
Machinery,
guess
all
with
this.
shirtwaists, yeah. It was mostly, I think, like sewing machines and stuff.
True. Okay.
They would probably hand cut it, with just scissors and then just use sewing machines. I don't
I
know.
suppose.
I didn't anticipate this aspect of course. I didn't do my research
I'm throwing
enough.
a wrench in it. No, you did
Yeah,
plenty.
no, it's okay. But yeah, I think it was kind of a basic, I don't know that there was a lot of like heavy machinery that was going into
That
the
tracks,
assembly of
actually.
the shirtwaists. It was mostly just sweatshop labor.
Yeah.
They managed to make a bunch of money off the shirtwaist company. They expand into the other floors of the building, and they each move into brownstones on the Upper East Side, so very fancy part of Manhattan. And they start arriving to work via chauffeur and all this lavish shit. So Harris and Blank are in the money. They are living it up, and they got this wealthy for some legitimate reasons. Blank was a very good salesman. That he had that salesman energy, and he put it to good use. Harris did know how to make a decent product on a budget. Of course, part of being on that budget is that it's a sweatshop and you're underpaying your
Right,
workers, but we'll
right.
get to that. They keep up with technology. They don't resist changes in technology that might affect their production. They're very on top of that. And then Harris organized the workers' floor in a way that supposedly minimalized conversation and distraction and increased productivity. So he's like, don't let these bitches talk to each
Don't let
other.
them talk. Don't let them sit near each other.
God forbid. We don't want these women to start chit chatting and be like, does it suck?
I feel like it sucks a
I think it
little.
might suck. So, of course, those were some of the legitimate ways that they managed to make money, but they also employed mostly immigrant girls who spoke no English. They put them in horrible working conditions. They prevented them from unionizing. These workers were working 52 hours a week for between $7 and $12 a week.
A week,
Yes.
of
So
course.
that would be like making $4.77 an hour to $8.17 an hour today. Um,
Mm-mm.
and they were also constantly supervised by a foreman. Blank in particular was really paranoid about them stealing. He was like, they're gonna shove bobbins in their pockets and then we're gonna lose overhead on whatever, He was
Yeah.
very like, he just thought all of these women were very sticky fingered and were constantly gonna try and steal from him.
Sounds
Which,
like a
like,
you problem.
right, maybe if you don't want people stealing from you, like, pay them a living wage.
Yeah, right? Like maybe support them in their lives.
Just a crazy thought, but that was not the philosophy. And I get to this a little bit later, but like, we're focusing on Blank and Harris because they had this massive tragedy that happened, but they were not this was pretty standard for how these businesses were run. It's not like they were like exceptionally egregious
Right.
offenders in this. Obviously, they were not sparkling examples of good human beings, but they were the average. Like, they weren't doing anything out of the ordinary, honestly. So I just want to say that because I just feel like it can be easy to be like, well, yeah, those two guys were really shitty, but it's not just them. It's like they were people who were working within a shitty way of things operating. As we will come to see, they also learned nothing, but continued to be assholes. So, not trying to give them a cookie about it or anything, but just for context. So, these women were also constantly supervised by a foreman, and their bags were searched every time they left work. And that was not enough for Blank. He also ordered that the secondary exit be blocked permanently and that
Mm-hmm.
most of the doors at the factory be locked at all times to prevent both theft and unauthorized breaks. So you can imagine how well that's going to work out when a fire breaks out.
No problems. I see no problems. Everything is on the up and up here.
So ironically, despite this layout that allegedly minimized talking and increased productivity, Harrison Blank's decision to put all of their workers in one spot versus breaking them up into smaller sweatshops, which kind of alludes to what you're talking about, rather than having all of this factory happening on like the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of this building in downtown, a lot of sweatshops would just have smaller operations in smaller rooms in other buildings. And that prevented workers from talking to each other because they weren't all in one spot. And so despite his apparently revolutionary minimizing talking layout, the women started chatting. And
Shock.
yes, so this choice to shove them all into one tiny space allowed them to kind of form sisterhood and like start talking about conditions, and they started commiserating and doing exactly what we were saying earlier, which is like, I think this might suck. Do you think it sucks? It does suck, right? And in 1909, they went on strike with the help of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. I don't know why I love that so much.
I love it. I don't know why either.
Yeah. It feels like, and I know it is about the same time period, but like in Mary Poppins, like the mom's whole song about unions and
yeah.
Not about unions, but about feminism.
Yeah.
I picture the Mary Poppins mom running around and being like, ladies garment workers. So Blank and Harris, of course, are like, unions bad, because better working conditions, means lower efficiency, basically. You have to give people breaks and have them work less hours. It's
what a bummer
for business. Yeah, real bummer. And they also, as former garment workers themselves, like took it personally. Like they were like, but we're one of you. Like, why are you trying to unionize against us? So union is the last thing that Blank and Harris want to happen. And so they hired cops and thugs to beat the protesters and make their lives miserable and harass them and try and threaten them into obedience.
Of course they did.
I just love that it's cops and thugs.
Cops and thugs. Not that they are
all that
the same
all the time.
thing.
Right.
I didn't say that. Who said that?
What? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they're just like NYPD or the mob, whatever we want. I don't know that it was
whoever's available.
Whoever, we'll take them as long as you got a nightstick or something to beat people
you
up
with.
Let's
come
go.
Beat up some teens?
Maybe it was like an A-B experiment. They were like, who's more efficient at threatening people? The cops
oh my God.
Or the thugs?
Oh my God.
Anyway, neither of them were fully affected because the strike kept going. The ladies held out, and it went on into 1910. And that's when Blank and Harris finally said, okay, fine, we'll give you shorter hours and better pay, but you can't unionize. Like, that was part of the deal. So among the shortcuts and loopholes that Blank and Harris were taking advantage of was this technicality around the occupancy limit of the 9th floor of the Asch building. Vertical space on this floor was counted in the space per person calculations.
Okay.
Right. So it had high ceilings, so they were able to fudge and be like, well, it's this many square feet total, which includes the space from the ceiling to the floor.
Wow. Okay.
So we can shove legally 240 people into this floor that was a relatively small area. So basically it's like, okay, if I have a, 10 foot by 10 foot room with 9 foot ceilings, I can only cram this many people in. But if they're 12-foot ceilings, I can cram a few more, even though the actual width of the room has not changed.
On paper, it looks totally reasonable and fine. That's really...
Yeah. So they use this loophole. They cram 240 people onto the 9th floor. And I will post a diagram of the 9th floor as well, like in the show notes. And it's also in that Cornell series of photos. And you can see from the diagram, there are a bunch of super long tables in it, and it's really tight. You can just see even from the diagram how tightly people would have been crammed in there. And there are all these super long tables that are blocking anyone who's working in the middle of the table can't get to the edge very easily.
Oh, okay.
Because there's a line of people at each table. And so it would be very easy to be blocked in, especially if there are 199 people around you, as there would have been on March 25th, 1911.
My heart rate is already going up.
So just to give you a little bit more about the layout of the factory, there were 4 elevators with access to the factory floors, but only one was operational at the time of the fire. It held 12 people, and workers had to file down this long, narrow corridor to even get to it.
Wow.
There were also 2 stairways down to the street. One was locked because we don't want these bitches stealing bobbins.
Goddamn bitches and bobbins.
Bitchity bobbiny boo. You can't have it.
Stop stealing my bobbins.
Bitches love bobbins.
They do, and they gotta make some money because they're not making any from these grifters.
That one stairway was locked, and the door only opened inward. So
no, my My phobia is coming out just thinking about it. Oh,
Yes, so
okay.
if a group of panicked people are running toward this door and they are all rushing forward, the person in front is not going to be able to pull the door open because they're getting pressed from behind.
No, 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 no.
There was a fire escape, but it was so narrow that it would have taken all of the workers hours to use it successfully in ideal circumstances. So with the factory not actively on fire.
Right.
It also didn't go all the way down to the ground.
Jesus. Okay, so
Yeah. So, yeah, the fire escape did not reach the ground. It stopped at the second floor.
the second? Okay, that's not even a reasonable jump.
Well, I don't know how long, like, yeah, you don't know if you had to dangle off the bottom and then just, like, go for the, I don't know how tall, because I guess if you think about it, it might just be, like, 10 feet or something. You could probably survive it. If it's, like, ground floor and then second floor.
And I know a lot of those buildings had like a swing down ladder or whatever, but I don't know, 2 stories seems
This doesn't sound like it had that. It sounds like it just literally stopped.
just stopped. Okay, well that's wow.
If you think all this is sounding bad, just wait.
Uh,
It turns out that fire danger in the garment industry was well established. And in fact, Blank and Harris themselves had a factory or two burn in suspicious circumstances in the past.
oh, so we already have fire.
Yes, but without fatalities. So
Okay.
it appears that they had a little habit of torching their factories when they needed insurance money, which, again, this was common practice back then. Like,
Right.
a lot of factory owners did this. They were like, oh, we need some extra cash. Burn that one down.
Right.
It was a lot harder to prove the causes of fires at the time. It was easy to get away with as an owner because you could access the building when nobody else was there. So there are no witnesses to be like, we saw him shut, it's not
Right.
suspicious for you to be in your own building. And you can go at all hours and then be like, oh my gosh, nobody was there. It must have been an accident. Like,
Good heavens.
how mysterious. Yeah. As we established, Blank and Harris, not great humanitarians, but they were not setting fires to buildings with people in them. Like, they weren't going around and torching their factories while their workers were in them. They didn't start this fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory building. But they also had not installed sprinklers in the building.
Okay.
And I've seen some people theorize that was so they could get away with torching it more easily. But it was also really expensive to do. And so it could have just been a cost-cutting thing. It wasn't necessarily so nefarious that they were like, we're not going to put in sprinklers in case we need to light this bitch up. Like,
Right.
they might have just been like, that's expensive. We're not doing it.
Also, we don't
and it
care
wasn't-
about these bitches at all. So
Right. I mean, again, they were not setting fire to any occupied buildings, but we're not giving this building primo conditions for survivability either. And I think probably they were just like, that costs money, we're not doing it. And it wasn't a requirement. It wasn't legally required. So
who cares about the safety of workers if it's not required? I mean,
exactly.
waste of money.
So to give you an idea of the fun time these workers were having at the factory, the fire started at 4:45 p.m. on a Saturday, and there were 600 people there working.
600?
Yes, total. Including, I guess, to their very, very minimal credit, Blank and Harris. They were there. So they
Oh.
weren't just making everybody else come in on Saturday. They were there too. So,
Did they have the elevator?
you'll find out.
Okay.
This was also, like, this was post-strike. Like, they were supposed to be having better hours. They're all
Yeah,
there.
okay, Saturday at, what did you say, 6 p.m.?
No, 4:45.
4:45.
So,
Oh, okay, but that's still technically evening.
200 of those people were on the 9th floor. Harris and Blank were in their offices on the 10th floor. The fire started on the 8th floor in a rag bin that was surrounded by basically nothing but flammable material on all sides. They had these bins under the tables where they would put the scraps and the rags and everything that they weren't using, all of this old material. And there were hundreds of pounds of cuttings in this one bin, which was wooden.
Oh, of course.
Yes, a wooden bin under a table with fabric hanging all around it and full of fabric. At the time, there were a lot of different reports of what allegedly started the fire, and I don't know that we know for sure, but the fire marshal concluded that it was a cigarette that had an unextinguished cigarette or match that had been tossed into this bin and made it go up.
And I'm sure everybody was smoking at the time.
Right, that's the thing. So workers, of course, were not allowed to smoke on the factory floor, but they would sneak cigarettes to get through the fucking day because
Yeah,
you're
I
working.
would. I absolutely would.
Yeah, I saw something that like they were smoking them like through holes in their shirts and stuff. Like
Oh,
they were keeping them hidden, but they
right.
were smoking. And then, what's the easiest place to toss it in this bin full of rags that then it'll get covered up and no one's going to know that you were smoking. And it could have been anybody who was smoking it, so you don't get in trouble.
Yeah, jeez Louise. Okay.
So you're just trying to exist
Just
through
trying to make it. God.
sheer will and nicotine.
Nicotine, which might sometimes is the only fuel.
Sometimes. So somebody didn't extinguish their cigarette or their match and they tossed it in this rag bin. The rag bin goes up.
Right.
The floor manager tries to use a fire hose. There's a fire hose on the floor. He's like, great, let's use this fire hose. But of course, it was not up to date. It's rusted shut. It's rotted out.
Great.
It doesn't work. Something really got to me about, I was like, the rusted shut, I get it. The fact that it was like the hose was rotted
Right.
out. How old and in what horrible conditions does a fire hose have to be
Yeah.
rot? I really hate that. And rusted shut. So, but it wasn't enough for it to just be one or the other. It was both. Like nobody noticed this problem. So fire starts spreading. People start to panic. They start shoving their way out. There's a phone on the 8th floor that goes up to the 10th floor. So some workers manage to use that phone and call the 10th floor, and they warn Harrison Blank that there's a fire and that they can't put it out because the fucking fire hose is rusted shut, you assholes.
You complete ass hats.
So people on the 10th floor had roof access. So they ran up, and a school next door, some of the teachers saw that this fire was happening and very quickly and smartly set up ladders from the rooftop of the school to the rooftop of the Asch building so that the people who were on the roof of the Asch building could cross to safety.
My God.
Yeah. So that's how Blank and Harris escape. Most of the
those
executives,
fuckers. Of course they did.
Yeah. So the people on the 10th floor, I wasn't really able to get a stat specifically for if anyone from the 10th floor died, but most people just went, we're getting on the roof, and then they crossed over to this school and they survived. But there was no phone system on the 9th floor. So the workers on the 9th floor didn't know about the fire until it reached them.
Wow.
People on every floor are panicking and shoving. Some made it down the fire escapes, which led all straight through the flames. So the fire escape is going down the side of the building. Flames are coming out of the side of the building and hitting the fire escape. And it starts to warp from the extreme heat and from the weight of all these people on it.
Jesus Christ.
Some people piled into the one working elevator, which again held 12 people at a time. It stopped working after 4 trips. So I would love to find out more about this elevator operator, and I should have done this research, but went up and down 4 times in a fire to get people.
Wow.
But then it physically stopped working, and the elevator operator couldn't get up anymore. And there were girls waiting for the elevator to come back for them, and it didn't. And so those girls just hurled themselves into the elevator shaft.
Oh.
Your back is to a fire, your front is to an elevator shaft. What's your choice there?
Right.
So some girls escaped down the one stairwell to find that the door was locked and burned alive in the stairwell.
Wow.
Many hurled themselves out of windows to escape the flames because there was just nowhere else. And firefighters arrived pretty fast because it's like downtown Manhattan, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So word gets out really quickly. But it's like horse and carriage. Like the fire truck is a horse-drawn
buggy
wagon.
Yeah.
Yes, with pressurized hoses, but not strong enough to reach the 9th and 10th floor.
Mm-mm.
And the firefighters were holding nets under the windows once people started jumping to try and catch them, but it was too high a fall, and everybody who jumped died.
Wow.
And so to add to the absolute horrendous tragedy, the bodies of the people who were jumping started piling on the fire hoses. Fire hoses were already struggling to reach the top of the building. And so then the weight of all of these bodies on the fire hoses start compressing the water and make them even less able to fight the fire.
Oh my God. Okay, so we're just having one failure after another.
So the fire actually was contained relatively quickly. I saw one thing that just said less than half an hour. I saw other things say like 18 minutes exactly. But not that long. I mean, obviously a horrifically long time if you were trapped in a burning building with no escape. But 18 minutes, a lot faster than I expected. Like, I thought this thing was raging for hours or something.
That's where my imagination took me.
So you can imagine the chaos that it was all happening in that short amount of time. But the fire, of course, had the perfect conditions to just be extremely chaotic and deadly in that short span. The fire escape, our old friend the fire escape, the dubious fire escape, collapsed eventually under the weight of people on it. And it cut off yet another means of escape. Some people went up rather than down and went over the roof and got to safety. But 146 people who were mostly young Jewish and Italian immigrant girls died. It was 123 women and girls and 23 men who died. Yeah. And in a detail that I did get from Wikipedia, so I would get tisked at by Henry Cavill. But I thought it was too tragic not to put in, just in case it is true. One of the young men was seen kissing one of the girls at a window before they both jumped to their deaths out of the window. Yeah.
No.
I know. It's a rough one, man.
That's rough.
But we're through it. We're through the tragedy itself.
Good God. I mean, there's like every aspect of it, from the two douchebags to the very end. Like it's almost like a scripted, like fated thing for like not only the failure to set up the things that should have been already set up, but like, you know, the failure of the fire escape, the failure of the elevator, the hoses, those all seem outside of anyone's control, in addition to the things that could have been controlled. Like, yeah, one horrific accident after, like, that's just,
it was a horrendous perfect storm of circumstances that could have happened to any number of factories at the time.
Yeah, truly. Because I'm sure, like you said, those two guys weren't outside of the realm of normalcy as far as how they were run.
Yeah. And as I hinted at earlier, they did not learn a lesson. So obviously after the tragedy, they were like widely criticized for their lack of fire safety, which was, again, it was pretty standard for the time. But of course, 146 people just died, so people are a little up in arms about it.
Right.
They did get indicted for manslaughter. Of course, they were rich, and that means the same thing that it means now. So they got a fancy lawyer, and they got themselves acquitted. They did pay a hefty $75 to each victim's family in a civil suit that came along later. But they had gotten insurance compensation, which gave them $400 per victim.
No. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm. So they turned a $325 profit per victim after paying the victims' families. That's a $47,450 profit off the deaths of their workers in 1911. So that's a shit ton of money.
That's a lot of money. Well, they're
so lovely.
In a special level of hell that I
I'm not
exists.
done.
Okay.
With their
right.
shenanigans.
That's so great. And I love to hear it.
So they tried to stay in the garment game, got up to their old tricks with massively increased scrutiny. So they were like, oh, we can't just keep doing this shit. Blank got caught locking the factory doors again. Learned nothing. The final straw came, again, this is like it feels scripted.
Yeah.
Like there's no way this is real. Final straw came when they were caught sewing fake labels into their clothes that certified that the clothes were made under good working conditions. So they're literally making their sweatshop workers sew labels into the clothes saying this is not a sweatshop.
Can you imagine? Oh my God.
It's so like, you're like the narcissism,
pure
the level of entitlement.
Epitome of narcissism. And
after being responsible for the deaths of 146 people.
Well, I mean, they got a huge payout for it. So I guess, right. They would just...
Yeah, I guess.
If it happens
after being
again,
rewarded for the deaths of 146 people.
A slap on the wrist and then literally getting rewarded for the faulty setup. And then, oh my God, yeah, just that he was caught locking the doors again really makes me want to hurl myself into this wall. But like... Yeah. The fact that someone was like, hey, what you doing? Didn't that happen before?
Wasn't this part of a problem that I'm recollecting?
Just
I
thinking.
feel like there was a tragedy.
Not that long ago, probably.
Maybe not that long ago where this resulted in the deaths of hundreds of people. No, not hundreds, I guess. Over 100.
Of young women.
Which is exactly why it doesn't fucking matter.
It didn't matter.
I think what makes me so angry about it is that, like, you want to have a sense of being like, but you were in that circumstance. Like, you were those people and you had no empathy for them just because they're in the earlier stage of their, business days than you are now, and you're in the high up successful tier. So you're done thinking about that level of person. Like, ugh.
You did it. You pulled yourself up by the bootstraps, as they say. You went through all the horrors of it, and now you don't have to deal with it. And
yeah, and it's Harris especially, like, because he was the actual sweatshop worker. Like, Blank, I'm like, he's clearly just kind of a narcissistic salesman, dickhead. Like, doesn't surprise me. And I don't know, I would love to be a fly on the wall for, like, their whole kind of development of their relationship and know how much... Not that I want to give Harris a bunch of credit and assume that he was any more conscientious, because he
obviously
let
he
all
wasn't.
this horrible shit happen too. Yeah, and he was like I said, he was the one who was on the ground in these sweatshops and should have known how horrible the conditions were and didn't care. So no cookies for anybody, but
no.
I'm just curious, like, how much of an influence one was over the other, if they were both just like, we handshake, we don't give a shit about people. Right. Okay.
Right. We're on the same page. We're good.
Yeah. And then just the audacity to be like, well, we got to certify that these weren't made in horrible conditions. So we're going to make our workers in horrible conditions sew labels in that say that that's not horrible conditions.
The audacity, the height, oh my God, and the lack of any sort of remorse. Like,
yeah.
And the fact that if we could get away with it, yeah, and I know you're going to go into the follow-up labor laws that were then put into place, but like,
yes,
if they didn't exist, we'd still be doing that shit.
Oh, people are still doing it, finding loopholes to get around the labor laws,
I'm surprised
absolutely. Sweatshops are still a thing.
Yeah. I mean, but even like in New York, there would probably...
Yep.
Ew, gross. Well, continue.
I mean, fortunately, their business never recovered. And in 1918, they did close the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. Harris went back to being a tailor, and Blank just kept doing business stuff, question mark.
As you do.
Yeah, with moderate success. He was never as successful as he was with the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. But okay, it's not all doom and gloom. As we alluded to, this did make a difference in U.S. labor laws. So workers, unions, and politicians were able to use the tragedy to demonstrate the need for better working conditions. Survivors and witnesses kind of banded together to push for laws that would help workers. The Factory Investigation Committee was formed because of this tragedy, and they did site visits and inspections, which led to 38 new laws regulating labor in New York State that were later mimicked more widely federally. Working hours were limited for women and children.
Thank you.
These women who were children. Children who were
who are
female children. Improved eating and bathroom facilities for workers were also put into place, and very importantly, of course, better fire safety measures were mandated, like sprinkler systems in tall buildings. It was no longer optional to have a sprinkler system.
The bar
in a building that
was
tall.
Literally on the floor.
the ground floor.
The ground below, basement level. I guess we'll give them a lunchroom and sprinklers for death by fire inevitability. God.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that we are trying to do here is like talk about people who don't get talked about. I tried to find information on the victims of the fire, and there just isn't that much, I think, because of the time period and their socioeconomic status and how young they were. So there is a list on Cornell's website, and you can like click on people's names, but basically all the information you get is like their name, where they were from, maybe their addresses at the time, which was interesting, and then their age. So there's just not a lot. Even the list of survivors is like kind of sparse on information, but I did find out a little about one of the survivors. She was the last remaining survivor of the fire. Her name was Rose Friedman, and she was 2 days away from her 18th birthday when the fire happened in 1911. Whoa. She was born in Vienna, which is funny. I was just there. But at a time when it was not the lovely place that it is now, it was not super duper fantastic for workers. And she immigrated when she was 15. She was the daughter of a businessman, and she originally stayed home to like tend their house, but she wanted to be like real American girls. Kind of like I said before, there was this perception that like, ooh, American girls are out getting jobs, they're teaching, they're working in factory, you know, whatever it is. I want to be a real American girl. And so at 16, she got this job at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory. So she had worked there for almost 2 years when the fire happened. And she escaped the fire by going up and following the executives, because she was like, I bet these these assholes, my words, not hers, have a way out in case of emergency.
I'm
like
smart.
They're not locking the doors they're using.
Right, of course.
And so she followed them onto the roof and crossed over from the Asch building to the school or one of the other buildings nearby. And she didn't pass away until 2001. She passed away in Beverly Hills, and she was, as I said, the last remaining survivor. She was 107.
Oh my God.
When she died, which means she saw the turns of 2 centuries.
Holy cow.
She spoke 6 languages and was studying Spanish, so she was developing a 7th when she died. And her experience made her a lifelong supporter of unions, and she spoke at a garment workers rally in Los Angeles when she was 104.
Good Lord, Rose.
Yeah. So that is the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911.
And I'm upset.
It's very upsetting.
It's really... That's so fucked.
Yes, it is. But now we have better labor laws, and some people adhere to them.
And some people, yeah, some people.
And some people make their workers pee in bottles. So you're welcome for that lovely, cheerful piece of bonus content for you. And
eat the rich.
eat the rich and eat the rude. Yeah, exactly. The class war. If you weren't already amped up for the class wars, here we are. We're here to encourage you. The class wars. Yeah, so that was our first bonus episode. Hopefully you all enjoyed it.
I did.
Enjoyed it. Enjoyed the horrible, horrible feelings.
It's good. It's galvanizing.
Yeah. You're just like, and it's the same kind of like, and you know, I wonder if more factory workers had been men on average, how much the conditions would have changed. I mean, if it was still immigrants, probably not.
Probably not. It's just, it just adds to the level of tragedy for some reason for me to, you know, very young women who were just taken advantage of because it was easier to do that for them, to them.
Well, and especially like if most of them didn't even speak English.
Right.
You know, if the unions are coming around and trying to talk to them, how effective was it? How much of that, like how many translations were offered for things, like, or how many of them could even understand what they were agreeing to or what the conditions were or were going to be.
Yeah, that's a good, that if you can't even understand what your rights are or possibly could be, like.
Yeah, which is a huge problem still with so many other things. Mm-hmm. Like I just heard something about, you know, statistics, and I don't remember the exact statistics, but the statistics on how many teen arrestees actually understand their Miranda rights and can actually like tell you what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure even adult people, just if you get arrested, ask for a lawyer and don't let anybody tell you you shouldn't. This is a whole other tangent that I'm sure we'll get on plenty of other times. But this was our first bonus episode. I hope you enjoyed. Tell your friends. And yeah, eat the rich.
Eat the rich and the rude.